I think arresting and detaining Job Sikhala was a really silly thing to do. I've said that to the Secretary for Justice and to the Minister of Justice. When I spoke to the Secretary for Justice about that, she said to me, but every time we release Job Sikhala, he breaks his bail conditions. Job is a street kid. We shouldn't take him seriously. He's no threat politically to anybody. He loves being in prison. He loves getting photographed in chains. He does us immense damage. If we were to release Job Sikhala tomorrow, we'd stop all that nonsense. We proceed against him by summons. Leave him to run around, okay? But that's just plain political stupidity. It really is. It really is. And it's the kind of thing that we should not be doing. It's the kind of mistake we should not be making.
Does it have any impact on the economy in any way?
No, well, of course it does, because it keeps us isolated internationally. Our international isolation, the impact of Zadera, is very serious. Zadera costs us a lot of money. And, I just take one small personal example. I bought a car a couple of years ago in Japan, and I had to pay some $10,000 for it. I couldn't transfer US dollars. I had to go to my bank eventually after 3 months and buy 1,000,000 yen and send yen, because if every time I tried to transfer 10,000 US dollars, the banks, international banks, said no.
Correspondent banks.
Zadera, correspondent bank. We don't have any correspondent banks. How can you work like that? I mean, the Americans say that their sanctions are targeted. They're not. They affect every Zimbabwean, without exception, because they've isolated us completely from the international monetary system. It doesn't matter what they say, because the Americans are so dominant internationally. If they threaten international banks like CBZ, CBZ was fined $385 million. That's 3 times its capital base by the Americans for violating sanctions. When we investigated that, there were 14,000 violations. Some of them were payments internationally for visa applications, $100. And these guys said that's a violation of Zadera. And as a result, Deutsche Bank won't trade with Stanbic Bank, even though they've had a relationship with Stanbic Bank for the last 50 years. And who does trade with us? South African banks. We're back in like the Rhodesian days, where if we want to transfer money abroad, we have to ask a South African bank to do it for us, or a Botswana bank, or a bank in Mozambique, or a bank in Zambia. We can't do it ourselves. And that costs money. That costs money. For me, in buying my car, it cost me 7% of the value of the currency. That's very expensive. And so I think that, and any political, we make a misstep here, and it is blown up by the international. That incident last year where those 3 girls were abducted, allegations of abduction, or that pastor who was abducted, and eventually after 9 days he emerged at Naibira. Okay, yeah, and he was in a suit in Naibira. He'd had a bath. His cell phone was fully charged, and he's been abducted, and he's now a resident of the United States on a political refugee ticket. In fact, those 3 girls, so-called abducted, they were filmed buying in a supermarket in Bandura by the store cameras. And now one of them is in Norway, again, one is in Britain, But those incidents are taken out and they're blown up. The other day we had a delegation here from the State Department, talking to the opposition and so on, finding out the CIO they weren't properly informed that they were here. You mustn't keep secrets from the CIO. If you do, you're going to be investigated because they're suspicious. So these 3 State Department were then, they attempted to stop them on the Lomagundi Road when they were going back to the American embassy. And it was a terrifying experience. 3 unmarked cars block you in on the road, and the driver, the US embassy driver, is trained now to handle that. He gets away, he drives to the embassy, they pursue him. He drives through the gates and they lock the gates behind him. They put those 3 staffers on a plane guarded by US Marines. Can you imagine what that does in Washington? You know, and that's the kind of thing that just should not happen. It should not happen. And the Director General Moyo, he should have been told, look, if you want to inquire with these people, then go to the embassy and ask to see them. Call them in. But you don't try and stop them on the Lomagundi Road with 3 unmarked vehicles. Please. And the State Department looks at that and they says, you want us to lift Zadira? What have you done? You're still behaving like a delinquent. And you speak to any international ambassador here with a heart for Zimbabwe, and he just says, what can we do? How can we stop these kind of silly? Because that has no economic implications whatsoever, but it has political implications and it increases our isolation. And we need to be one of the things the president said in 2018 when he was inaugurated, and he said it again at the stadium here with this inauguration. He wants to re-engage with the West. He wants to rejoin the Commonwealth. Okay? And Britain 2 years ago, a year ago, was saying there's no grounds on which we can permit you to come back into the Commonwealth. On what grounds? But in fact, if we were allowed back into the Commonwealth, that would make us more accountable to our peers in the Commonwealth. 52 countries. The Harare Declaration was negotiated here. When Mugabe was president, we signed it. It would bring pressure on our government in a governance sense. Anyway, those things are being attended to. But we need to be more careful about how we deal with the opposition.